Hello YouTube, my name's Riley, and if you know me, you probably know that I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars so much. Literally since before I can even remember having memories, I've just always loved Star Wars. You know, there's a lot of people that have never seen Star Wars, and now trying to get into it might be a little bit difficult with all of the new content that's coming out. What order do I watch it in? Why are there so many movies? What is a Baby Yoda? I wanted to just kind of make a video explaining all of that and give you what I think are the best 3 different orders that you can watch the movies in. And the third order also includes a ton of other media outside of the movies, which I'll get into later. And just to preface all of this, if you don't know, Star Wars, unlike a lot of other franchises, it all takes place in one timeline. So the new movies are not remakes or anything. They're continuing the story of the first movies that George Lucas made, and they all exist in one universe. That being said, there is technically a second Star Wars universe, which is now called Star Wars Legends, and that basically encompasses all of the books and comic books and video games and a bunch of other stuff that existed before Disney took over Lucasfilm in 2015. With the creation of the new sequel trilogy, it was very difficult to create a new original story in that time period with all of the content that existed, because they had already fleshed out this whole elaborate story with Luke, Leia, and Han and a bunch of other characters. So that was basically scrapped, and this new canon was introduced in 2015, and that is basically the timeline that I'm going to be covering in this video. The first order you can watch it in is the theatrical release order. Now this is definitely a great order to watch it in if this is your first time seeing Star Wars. It starts with the original trilogy, which is Episode 4, A New Hope, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Then we go to the prequels, which were made in the early 2000s. So that's The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. Then you jump from Episode 3 to Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and then The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. You might also know that there are now 2 standalone films called Rogue One and Solo, which I would also definitely recommend watching, but I would wait until after you go through the entire Skywalker saga, because they were released in between the sequel trilogy, so you're just jumping back and forth between different eras way too much. So I would save those for the end for sure if you're going to watch it in this order. And this is the approach that most people do take. I guess it just makes sense to watch them in the order that they were released. It's definitely not confusing. You don't need to see the prequels in order to watch the original trilogy. That being said, you definitely do need to see the original trilogy in order to watch the sequels. I would definitely recommend this for a new viewer, but I would also recommend the second order, which is the chronological order. And this is my preferred method of watching the movies, but that is also coming from someone who's seen all of them so many times. I think it really enhances the storytelling experience that you get, because you really get to see from the very beginning to the very end exactly how everything leads to each thing. The only thing that's a little bit confusing about it is you're jumping back and forth between different levels of film quality. You have the prequels, which are very CGI based, and then you jump straight to the original trilogy made in the 70s and 80s, which has way more practical effects and puppets. And then you jump to the sequel trilogy, which was made much more recently and is even higher quality, but also harkens back to that production value of the original trilogy. This order basically starts with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Then you're going to want to watch Solo, which is about 8 years after Revenge of the Sith. Then Rogue One is next, which is actually immediately before A New Hope, which is the original movie. Then you're going to watch the originals, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Then, jumping 30 years into the future, you have Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and then, most recently, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this third order is my personal favorite of all of them, but this is also coming from a diehard. This is what I consider to be like the ultimate chronological order. So this is including a lot of material from the TV shows and video games. If you don't know, there are TV shows that coexist with the movies. There's also a bunch of comic books and novels and junior novels and VR games. They've really fleshed out this universe a lot just in the last 5 years. These stories add so much interesting stuff to the movies and really just enhance the experience in a lot of ways. You get to see different sides of these characters. You get to see things that are referred to in the movies, but you don't actually get to see in the movies. And there's just some really, really cool, like, emotional storylines. A lot of these, especially the animated shows, are slept on a lot and people don't really take them as seriously. The storytellers who made these shows really committed to making it a cinematic experience and fleshing out honest, mature stories that feel real in the universe of Star Wars. If you're going to watch it in this order, you're going to start with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, then you're going to go to Attack of the Clones. Then we have the Clone Wars. And if you've never seen the Clone Wars or don't know much about it, the show is told through different small story arcs. It centers around Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, the clones, a lot of the characters from the movies, and also introduces a bunch of new characters, including one of my favorites, Ahsoka. Especially if you're not a big fan of the prequels in general, watching the Clone Wars adds a lot of depth, I think, to those movies. It's just, I can't even explain it. It really is good. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't recommend watching the entire series if you're just trying to get through the basic Star Wars plotline. The first couple seasons are not as strong in animation and storytelling. There are some good episodes in there, but once you watch the later seasons, you'll understand what I mean. They put a lot of effort into these episodes. So there are about 120 something episodes in the Clone Wars. I've made a list that compiles of just 37 episodes that I think are the most important or just the best episodes. You're also going to want to start with the Clone Wars movie, which, bear with me girl, it's not a masterpiece. Most of the episodes are like seasons 4 through 7, but I would definitely recommend checking this out. Then you're going to watch Revenge of the Sith. Then, this is very, very important, you're going to watch the last 3 episodes of Clone Wars after Revenge of the Sith. Do not watch them before Revenge of the Sith, please. The last arc of the show actually overlaps with this movie, and it is so cool the way they do it. Then, there is a video game called Jedi Fallen Order. Now, this is not necessarily the most important thing and doesn't honestly really relate to any of the main characters in the movies, but it's just a very, very interesting, well put together story. You don't have to buy the game for yourself or anything. You can go on YouTube and find just a movie story version of the game that will just, you know, give you the important cutscenes that you need to see. Definitely check that out. Then next is Solo, a Star Wars story. Next, we have a show that I think is personally very underrated in the Star Wars universe, Star Wars Rebels. Once you get past the animation of this show, which is a little bit childish, you have a really, really interesting story. It follows this core group of heroes that don't appear in any of the movies, but their stories and their actions throughout the show actually end up playing a really big role in the movies later on, and you'll kind of see what I mean. It also continues a lot of the stories from the prequel trilogy and from Clone Wars, so if you're a Clone Wars fan, I would definitely recommend watching this. There's 4 seasons of this show, so I wouldn't recommend watching the entire thing because there are a lot of filler episodes. If you don't watch the entire series, you won't be very confused. Just in the last episodes, there might be a few references or a few minor characters that you're kind of like,
who are they?
So I've compiled a list of 31 of the most important episodes. That list will be in the description. We might see some of those characters again in the future if some rumors online are true, but I don't know. Then we have Rogue One, then the original trilogy again, then something that I also think is very underrated in the Star Wars universe is the Battlefront 2 single player campaign. Now, if you don't know what I'm saying, basically Battlefront 2 is a video game. I've never played it before, but you can kind of choose between different characters and different locations to have battles, and you can fight other people online. There is a single player campaign that goes along with this game that follows a storyline of a character named Iden Versio. It's actually a very, very interesting story, and it does a really, really great job of kind of finishing up the original trilogy, in my opinion. I must warn you that there is a second update that they released of this called Battlefront 2 Resurrection, and I would not recommend watching that until after you've seen The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. You can find a movie version of this campaign on YouTube. I would definitely give that a watch. Then we have what everyone has been talking about lately, The Mandalorian. Now, this show is definitely worth the hype. Especially if you like Rebels and Clone Wars, you're for sure going to be a fan of this. And if you want to see Baby Yoda, give it a watch. It's only 8 episodes. In my opinion, every single episode was thoroughly entertaining. It's the first live action Star Wars show. It's really, really an incredible story. And then we're left with the final 3 movies, which are The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. And I personally really love these movies. A lot of people have had a lot of issues with them. They don't think that they are really true to what Star Wars movies have been in the past. And I do think that they, missed the mark on a couple of things, but there's never going to be a perfect Star Wars anything, and I've learned to just kind of accept it for what it is and appreciate the good elements, even if it's not everyone's favorite. So there you go. Those are the 3 different lists I've compiled of the best order to watch the Star Wars movies in. Let me know if you agree with these lists or if you have your own order that you watch the movies in, because honestly, you could watch them in other orders. I've seen people that watch A New Hope and then Empire Strikes Back and then the prequels and then Return of the Jedi and then the sequels. There's a lot of different things you can do. And if you're a first-time viewer and you choose to watch the movies with one of these lists, let me know and let me know what you think. And I hope that you subscribe to this channel because I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.